So overall, what is your take on homework in general for grade school, K through 12?
From what I hear, it's overdone, and the teachers don't seem to be aware of what the other teachers are doing in this way, so it tends to pile up. Now, in a sane world, instead of being burdened with homework from their teachers, the kids would be outdoors, or they would be learning other things that can't be learned in school. Sometimes that would be outdoors too, such as how to organize a game and get something going that way, or wandering in the woods, just seeing what's there.
You're talking about after school or during school?
After school.
After school, yes, yes. Excuse me, can we get a Diet Coke for him? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. But if homework is in place of gawking at a screen idly and not doing anything at all, that's just replacing one kind of bad thing with a different kind of bad thing. And the different kind of bad thing, the 3 or 4 plus hours of homework every night, ultimately is going to backfire because it.
Now come collect the empties. Thank you.
It'll instill in the students a sort of loathing of learning. It weighs them down. It shouldn't be. They're young people. They need to be doing other things besides the drudgery that most homework is. So I'd say definitely it needs to be cut back, but when I say that, I don't mean that therefore these young people should be doing something else that may be even worse, which is to spend their days in front of a screen. That's a problem that parents have to address, but it might be helpful too if you have a private school, if some things can be done in tandem between the school and the parents to make sure that doesn't happen. Games, for instance, not sports turned into a different kind of drudgery, but games where kids can really actually enjoy themselves without having to take it seriously as the prelude to a career or to a scholarship at a college.
Coffee, tea, desserts. You want any dessert? Coffee?
Okay.
No, thank you.
So it should be less, but it should be less so that the kids can have more of a real human life.
I like that.
And also, since we would want to retrench homework, maybe make it no more than what a slow student can perform in an hour and a half a night, and what a quick student might be able to perform in a half an hour per night, right? We want to do that, but then we have to be aware of the needs of different teachers teaching various subjects, because they need to be aware of what the other is assigning and when, and there are certain subjects that really do require practice, right?
Which ones would you say?
The two most obvious are math and foreign languages. There's no substitute for them, right? Now, it may be that if your classes are organized correctly, you can get a lot of practice done in class, maybe set aside one day out of the 5 so that the students will be doing nothing but getting practice in the performance of certain mathematical operations, okay? And certainly at least one day out of the 5, if you were teaching a foreign language, you would want to focus as much as possible on getting the students actually to speak. But with the foreign language, there are going to be certain kinds of things that you have to do that are not very well done in the classroom setting. They involve writing out sentences or translating a sentence from English into the foreign language or from the foreign language into English. That kind of practice, hard to do in the class, maybe best to do as homework, but you've got to make sure that this is sort of sharply directed, narrowly directed. Don't waste time. Don't multiply unnecessary things, right? If you've covered a certain kind of construction in the language, and you've got that, there's no need to keep doing that. If it's going to be reinforced by what you do every day in the classroom already, okay? Don't just pile up. Make sure that whatever you're asking the students to do is pointed at perhaps the development of some new awareness of a piece of grammar in the foreign language that you can tell them about it, talk about it in the classroom, but unless they are actually made to recognize it on a page and to translate it, it's just going to remain theoretical in the head, and then it's eventually going to vanish. So those are the two subjects.
What about like handwriting or grammar or science? Do you feel like those need similar drills in any way, or do you feel like those can be done in the classroom?
There's some homework for grammar, say for diagramming sentences. But things have to be, or for parsing. That was another thing that we used to teach. Now the problem, of course, is that most of your teachers at all levels of education in America cannot parse a sentence. They don't know the terms. They may not even understand the grammatical functions.
What is parsing?
To parse is to identify the exact function of any word or phrase or clause in a sentence.
So it's sort of like diagramming a sentence, but you have to know it ahead of time before you write it down.
You don't have to set the whole thing out. So you say, so for instance, to err is human, to forgive divine. Parse the infinitive to err, okay? And the kid would say it is an infinitive, present tense, active voice. It is the subject of the sentence, okay? The subject of the clause, to err is human. And that's it, okay? But other things might involve more. So you might have to say, this here is, this is a noun, it is the object of the preposition of, it is singular in number, it is masculine in gender, right? I mean, or this phrase, okay, is adverbial. It modifies the verb in the participial phrase, this here, right? And he was walking down the street. I saw him walking down the streets with his hands in his pockets. And you said, well, parse with his hands in his pockets. It's an adverbial phrase, okay? It modifies walking. Walking is participle modifying the object of the sentence, him, object of the verb saw. It's one way to interpret it. There's a different way to interpret it, but there's what with his hands in his pockets, adverbial phrase. Adverbial phrase composed of preposition with its object hands, his modifying hand, and so forth, right? But you fix what that thing is and what it's doing in that sentence.
And understand it all. That's the parsing.
Yeah, that's parsing. Yeah. And that's a kind of thing that is well done in both in the classroom, but also practice in at
home.
At home, yeah.
And how about science? Do you feel like
I don't think so. Assuming that you're reading Well, they might say, okay, what you need to do for this week is to read this chapter. Okay, everybody come to a class having read this chapter, right? And we're going to read this chapter in the science book this week, so make sure you read it beforehand. Okay, that's all. I don't think it's particularly useful to have students fussing around with objects. That can be done in the classroom better, right? Want to show them what happens when you toss a match on a bowl of heating oil. Okay, you know what happens? Nothing. The match goes out. Nothing at all. Okay. What happens though if that same heating oil is in aerosol form and you light a match? Why is that the case, right? Here's a block of ice, and here's the same amount of ice but divided into 9 ice cubes. We'll put a little bit of heat under each one and see which melts faster, the one block or the same volume but divided into 9 ice cubes. And why is that? Why are the ice cubes going to melt faster than the block, even though they contain the same amount of ice? What's up with that?
That's all in the classroom.
Yeah.
At home, maybe read something, but...
At home, read something, yeah. For the most part, right? I mean, there's going to be exceptions. There might be some times when you want them actually to do something at home, okay? But always we gotta do as much as possible in the classroom so as to relieve students of the necessity of just blah work at home, so that they can have real lives, right?
And real lives meaning?
They're doing things. They're reading things they like. They're playing a musical instrument because they enjoy playing it, not as part of some great strategy to get them into Dartmouth or Harvard. They're playing games with their siblings. They're outdoors. They're outdoor. I don't care what they're doing outdoors, just so long as they're outdoors. Just talking to neighbor kid, outdoors. Just wandering around the neighborhood, outdoors. Walking with the dog in the woods. Whatever they're doing outdoors, just so long as there's no smartphone, okay? All those things that used to belong to a real human life.
Because that's learning too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'll give you an example of this, okay? When I look back upon it, I'm kind of astonished that it occurred to nobody in my hometown to take advantage of this. So, when I was 9 years old, I made a discovery. There was huge escarpment of coal that had just been left there, about 150 feet high, on one side of the bluff that sort of banked Main Street in my town. And I went up there. Now, you couldn't fall off it, you just slide, right? I went up there and I discovered something. I discovered that if you cracked open one of these slabs of coal, on the thin side where there was a seam, that usually you would find a fossil inside, all right? And sometimes the fossils would be of different colors, just like the colors that you see when you spill oil on blacktop. Like if your car is leaking oil and it leaks onto a blacktop and the sun is shining on the blacktop, you get a weird kind of queasy rainbow coloring from the oil. It's not like what you get from water that's spilled. That's how you can tell it's oil. Well, that same kind of color I'd find inside the coal a lot of times. I ended up stuffing my pockets with the fossils that I liked. Most of them I just left there. I said, that's no good. I had 153 of them. I bring them home in my pockets. I had one that was really nice. It was about this big, and it had the imprints, a couple of dozen, about 2 dozen different ferns or plants or whatever. And there was some of that coloring effect too. It was the favorite one that I found. It was the best one I found. Of course, my mother threw them away a couple of years later.
I was going to ask, do you still have those now?
But they were there. They were there. They were there for the picking up. And nobody took advantage of that. No, it occurred to nobody. Hey, you know, we got tons of fossils up here. Why don't we incorporate them into our school lessons on geology? Okay. Occurred to nobody, but I only learned it because I was wandering up the woods.
Right.
I wouldn't have learned it otherwise, right? And I saw it. I handle it with my hands. I can tell you, if you bring me a slab of coal that's about like that, I can tell you from looking at it how likely it is that there's a fossil inside it.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Now, how about reading? At home, is reading a requirement? Is it considered homework? And how do we teach students to love reading?
Well, if you make it burdensome to them, you'll teach them to hate reading. And then you'll sort of slyly instruct them to go to Cliff Notes or Spark Notes or some other thing online that summarizes a chapter. And that's dreadful. That's worse than not reading at all. Okay? That will get them into the habit. It gets them into an evil habit. It's a very bad habit. So reading should be a pleasure. And if you're going to assign reading for homework, you got to understand that you are doing something that is not. You are not guaranteed to gain anything out of this. It could backfire on you very badly. Okay. Yeah, there should be some reading. But boy, if you assign too much, you will ensure that the student will hate literature. And this is why I recommend poetry so much, because it doesn't take that long to read. And if you are teaching poetry in the classroom, the students will be familiar with it, it'll be comfortable to them, and even though you read a poem and it only takes you a minute or two, it's a minute or two of an encounter with something that they're the like of which they're used to, and it may be a very powerful encounter. It doesn't swamp them. It's not a big gray cloud hanging over their heads. They may read it, think about it, and read it a couple of times. You may say, "Oh, just want you to read a couple of these poems here. Do remember." We'll read them in class again tomorrow. We'll talk about them. I want you to read them. And that's not going to hang over them like a dead weight on their necks. You teach the poetry, and then from there, as I've said many times, if you can talk intelligently about what the old poets do, then you can talk intelligently about any form of literature there is. Because the old poets also told stories, they had characters, they had plot lines, they employed symbols and irony. The poem would have a beginning, a middle, and an end, to come to a climax. Anything that you could say about a novel, you could say about an old poem that told a story. But the reverse is not true. And the poem has other advantages, one being that it enters the memory more readily and more deeply, especially if you've taught the students how to love the stuff, right? And it is not likely, or not nearly as likely, to give students the idea that this is drudgery. But as with nowadays, as with every form of literature, with poetry, you are going to have to lay down a line. We do not use the internet at all, not at all, when we're addressing these works. We don't say, well, we'll use it for these purposes, but we'll limit it there. No, there's got to be an absolute forbiddance, okay? because once you open that door, game's over. It's over. It's done. Student will not say, "What the heck did he mean by that line?" No, it'll just, and that's not reading. Just as if you're standing in front of a great painting, of a great portrait, let's say, and assume that you know who it's a portrait of. So it's a portrait of Thomas Jefferson. You don't need the internet. You maybe want to find out about the artist or something like that later on if you're a grown-up. But the main thing to do is to put yourself as a human being in front of this work of art and respond to it in a human way. Everything else is a distraction. In the literal sense, it tends to pull you apart.
How about the age of kids for poetry? How do you introduce the youngest and how young? And do you continue to do poetry every year?
Right away. Yeah. Think of nursery rhymes, okay? You should begin with nursery rhymes. And they enter the mind. Kid, begin with nursery rhymes and songs. And don't divorce poetry from singing, okay? They belong together. They've always belonged together. So, a lot of the songs that kids learn when they're little stay with them the rest of their lives. Right? So, that's what all the nursery rhymes, whether you spoke them or sang them, that's what they were for. They're just delight. It's one way to delight a little kid.
What do you think about if you're doing it with song, and then we talked yesterday about doing it with theater? How would you advise teachers to either partner with literature teachers or learn how to incorporate them into music class or into theater class and do it justice?
Well, I think the first order of business is to get the English teachers themselves to be comfortable with poetry. You would think that you wouldn't have to do. You would at least have that nailed down, but no, it's not true. Most of your English majors coming out of the colleges these days do not know poetry. They don't know grammar either, for that matter. So there's a lot of backwards shoring up that needs to be done first, because they can hardly talk to the music teachers and the theater teachers about a subject that they don't know very well. If you have that in place, then I think the first person that you need, that it might be helpful for you to get into tandem with, would be the music teacher. Let's teach these kids some great poems that have been set to music. Let's teach them to sing. There are plenty of those. I mean, there are hymns. There are hymns that, for instance, there are hymns that can stand as poems that are great as poems. They're great poems, and they are now hymns also. Okay, some of our greatest hymns are really good poems. Okay, so that's a natural association. Some of our best popular songs are very clever. I wouldn't call them as great poetry, but they're really clever and interesting as poems. Cole Porter, for instance. Cole Porter is a great lyricist. Rodgers and Hammerstein, it's Rodgers, wasn't it? Who was it? Rodgers and Hart. It was Larry Hart who was the great lyricist, and Rodgers wrote the music. Let's get together that way.
So broaden the poetry a little bit in those instances.
Broaden the poetry a little bit, and invite the music teacher into the conversation, right? Yeah. Now the theater is a little trickier because then we are talking specifically, if we're talking about poetry, if we're in the realm of poetry still, then we're talking about plays that are written in verse form, or much of the play is in verse, such as Shakespeare. With Shakespeare, we got high school students or near high school students putting on some Shakespeare, that's a lot of work. That's going to involve a lot of homework. There's a lot of practice. You got to learn your lines. But they're the English teacher and the theater teacher. I think that there's some mutual enrichment that could be going on there.
Yeah. Back to the reading thing, we sort of talked about, but how do you teach a child or a student to love reading? You don't just assign the drudgery at home. Is there anything else you can do to encourage them to love reading?
Yeah, you read to them.
Out
Everybody
loud.
knows. Always out loud, yeah. Yeah, and you have as much fun with it as possible. And kids love it. Kids will want to hear, little kids will want to hear you read that same thing that you read. You've read it 50 times, they want to hear it again. And if you skip a line, they'll notice it, okay? Because up here, have fun. Read in character. There's a great line in one of Dickens' novels, in Our Mutual Friend. So there's this old lady. She takes care of children in the day. That's part of her income. And the other part of her income is that she works a mangle for washing. She takes in other people's laundry, and the mangle is a washing device, right? And she got a teenage boy who's an orphan who is with her, who works the mangle, while the other littler kids are there. And she has him read the newspaper to her. And she loves it because, she says, he do the police in different voices. He do the police in different voices.
That's great.
T.S. Eliot almost named his poem, or sub-named his poem, The Wasteland, he do the police in different voices. So whenever I was reading to my kids, I would do the police in different voices. You heard a little bit of it. I could pump it up more, but when you're reading when you're reading The Grinch, Who Stole Christmas, that's Boris Karloff, who was the narrator. And when all you do, you get a little bit of his accent, you pretend that you've had a stroke that makes half of your mouth hang open like this. And when Cindy Lou Who was in bed with her cup, he crept to the chimney and stuffed the tree up.
And you have the book out while you do it, so they know you're reading.
And he did the same thing to the other whose houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other whose mouses. And that kind of thing enters the memory. I'm sure my daughter, my son, they'll be 80 years old, and they'll still have a memory of me saying, with a song in his heart, he descended Mount Crumpet, cheerily blowing hoo-hoo on his trumpet.
So you make it fun.
Yeah.
You show them that you're getting it from a book.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
do voices.
Oh, yeah. Sure, why not? It's fun. Yeah, all those stories with witches in them. I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too.
So, one of the questions that, well, there's a few more, but is there a point of diminishing returns?
Yeah.
If one has worked all day, work or school, does it make sense to push through, do homework, or is it at some point you're all done?
If the kid is not dawdling on purpose, all right? Now, if the kid is really struggling, then it's time for the parent to intervene, okay? Sometimes it's because the teacher hasn't taught it well, right? This is often the case with math because these teachers are instructed with algorithms to use that are insane, that clutter up the page. If you have a certain form of dyslexia, forget it, it's over, okay? I mean, I could show my daughter, do you want to multiply by 15? I'll show you how to multiply by 15. You take half of that and tack it on. Just move the 0. There, you just multiply by 15. You're going to multiply 15 times 74? What's half of it? 37. Okay. There's your answer. You should put a 0 on it. 370. So, well, you got to tack it on. You got to tack it on. It's 1110. But there are tricks that maybe the teacher doesn't know or didn't get to, or maybe the teacher doesn't like. But you got to step in there, okay? And if the algorithm is cluttered, then they're teaching a lot of things that are cluttered, that take too many steps, or that just mess up a page, okay? If that's what's going on, then the teacher's doing something wrong, okay? The doing of math ought to be clean and clear and swift, not messy and clotted, okay? But in any case, if the kid has really not gotten something, then, and is not dawdling, okay, then the parent needs to step in. If all the kids are having this, or a certain percentage, a decent percentage of them having this problem, then it's the teacher. Then it's on the teacher. Okay.
Yeah. What is the value in personal relationships and free time, conversation, and camaraderie?
That's what human life is for. And we got to remember, the education is for the sake of human life, not the other way around. Okay. If a kid is sacrificing a real kid life, a human life, for schooling, then the order of goods has been reversed, and that will not prove good in the end. Nature will assert itself, and the kid will either become a drudge, which is bad, or will hate schooling, which is bad. Either way, it's bad. Got to remember what the most important things are.
Do we crowd out God by doing too much?
Yeah, you can. The go-to person on this, I discovered only relatively late in my life, so I was probably I was in my late 30s when I read this book for the first time, and it changed my thinking on a lot of things. It's called Leisure, the Basis of Culture. And the author was a German Catholic philosopher named Joseph Pieper, P-I-E-P-E-R. He's one of the heroes that they had on the walls at Magdalen College.
I took a picture of all those, by the way,
yeah,
so I could remember them.
He says that a culture of total work, which is inhuman, is a culture that is gripped by the sin of sloth. And think about that for a second. If what you're doing all day long is work, and it's not necessitated by a desperate need to survive, right? You're not working 15 hours a day just to make sure that you can eat enough, okay? If that's a dire necessity and a bad thing, okay? But if you have subordinated the best things in life to work, then your spiritual sin, with the 7 deadly sins that ruin the soul, the one that most applies to you, all other things being equal, the one that's most applicable to you is sloth, because sloth does not mean that you're just lounging on the couch doing nothing. Workaholics are in the grip of sloth. It's a spiritual sluggishness. It refuses, or it can no longer take joy in what ought legitimately to bring joy. Sloth is the sin against the Sabbath. It's the sin against the Sabbath, what the Sabbath means, even if you are working all day long, 7 days a week. All those 7 days you were in the grip of this sin. It is totally compatible with a world which considers the workplace to be the most important place in human life. Not the home, not the neighborhood, not the church, but the workplace. Expect from such people that they lose their culture, okay, and that they will be deeply depressed, and they will not understand the best and highest things in human life. But they will never think that sloth is the last thing that they'll think applies to them. But he says, no. It's the first thing that applies to them. So we must not infect our young people with the deadly vice of sloth. School, as he points out in that book, comes from the Latin word which meant leisure. The Latin word was adopted from the Greek word, meaning leisure. And Aristotle, he says, rightly says, that we are unleisurely so that we may have leisure. That is, we work so as to clear space for leisure, and leisure is not much lounging about. Leisure is conversation, is reading a book for the pleasure of reading it. It's pottering in the garden, it's play. At its highest, it's the worship of God with other people together. Okay? And if school is getting in the way of that, then school has become monstrous. And if sports have gotten in the way of that, then sports have become perverted and corrupted.
That's my final question for the interview, but Brandon wanted to know if we wanted your opinion on more things for the curriculum as they're developing it. Would you be?
That's what I'm around for, yeah.
Okay.
And don't take my word as final on anything,
No,
because
it's just
it's
wisdom.
I can just throw in a couple of suggestions, and the teachers know a heck of a lot more than I do about what your typical 10-year-old right now can do. Mm-hmm. I know about what typical 10-year-olds used to be able to do.
Well, it's a good comparison to have.
Yeah. Well, I think Jefferson said in one of his letters, I can't find it, but he said in one of his letters that we got to understand that kids are just kids and not expect too much of them too early. So they shouldn't really start studying Greek till maybe they're about 11 years old. Before then, they study Latin. It's easier. Right? That's Jefferson saying, don't expect too much from a kid too early. So Greek, we'll wait till he's 11 to start ancient Greek.
I love it.